Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. In today's podcast, I wanted to discuss a couple of news stories. The first one was news that there were many business leaders that were going to the White House in the United States to talk to the president about raising the debt ceiling in order to pass the legislation that the Democrats in the House want to pass. And there was a number of it wasn't only CEOs of major corporations, it was also other stakeholder organizations, nonprofits like AARP, but there were a lot of large corporations, banks like Jamie Dimon from Chase and other banks, probably because the banks are going to be most impacted by this, but also distributing a lot of the money that's going to be spent. And they're probably talking on behalf of their clients as well. But a notable person on there was Puneet Ranjan from Deloitte. I mean, it makes total sense to me why he would be there, but I was just amazed because Big Four accounting firm CEOs are not typically at these things. But I think Deloitte's gotten pretty good at winning federal government contracts and being close to the federal government, as we've spoken about over the past year with all the COVID work that they won. So I think that's most likely why he's there. And I think it makes sense though, because the Big Four accounting firms are basically have their foot in the door of every large company in the world. So of course they would be aware of how this might affect their clients. And even if they aren't aware, I'm sure their clients are telling them about things they're worried about related to this debt ceiling. So I think it's very smart that he was there. And I think you probably don't need everybody else. I mean, maybe AARP and some of these other organizations that represent, individual stakeholders versus large companies. But I thought that was very interesting. I thought it was interesting that he was the only one of the Big Four accounting firms in there. And I mean, but it also makes sense because he's a global CEO, and the rest of the Big Four accounting firms, their global CEOs aren't as prominent as he is. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why he was there. But I think it's also their close relationship with the federal government and presence in Washington, D.C. So I think that's another reason he's probably close to somebody in the administration, which is why he was there, which will be, I think, potentially very good for Deloitte in the future as far as winning, is a sign of them winning more government work. So that was just something I thought was very interesting. And I think it might be a sign of more to come. I think that the Big Four accounting firms, if this administration really wants to do things like the vaccine mandate, that they're going to push it through. They're going to need the Big Four accounting firms' help. Not only the vaccine mandate, but ESG, all this stuff, they're going to have to push it through the Big Four accounting firms. And I don't think they know that yet. I don't think they realize how much power the Big Four accounting firms hold. But I think if Puneet Ranjan is there, then I think he's probably going to make them aware of how important the Big Four accounting firms are and how they're basically already in the door of every large organization. This episode is brought to you by Boomer. Boomer helps you ace the interview at the Big Four accounting firms, and it does this by helping you practice on questions typically asked on the Big Four interview. And if you use the link or promo code which goes to tryboomer.com/big4, or the promo code BIG4, then listeners get 10% off their purchase. So go ahead and check out their website, tryboomer.com, and see if you like all the tools they have that can help you prep for your Big Four interview, and you do choose to purchase it. Make sure to use the link in the show notes, because with that link, you're going to get 10% off, or make sure to use our promo code. All the details are in the show notes. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was some more information from the PwC reports. One of the PwC reports released over the past couple of days was mainly about diversity, but it released interesting information that I've never seen them release before. And it released the staffing numbers for the U.S., which was 40,000, at least the client-facing ones. And it did it by staffing level. So if we take a look at that, we can go by staffing level. The first staffing level is admin. And this is, I think, just an administrative person that helps with client work. And there was 1,761 of those. For associates, there was 9,990 associates, and this is in the U.S. For senior associates, there's 9,683. For manager, there was 7,339 employees. For senior manager, there was 4,877. For director, there was 5,692. For managing director, there was 710. And the partners aren't on here because they aren't considered employees, but they normally release that number each year in the financial report. But I think this shows a few interesting things. I think it's pretty funny that there's basically the same amount of associates and senior associates. So I think that just shows that a lot of associates probably leave the firm. That's where you have the most turnover. Another thing is the senior managers. There's not very many of them at PwC in the US. But you have to remember that's a new position because they just made people go through that step. Before at PwC, you went from manager to director. So that's why there's more directors at PwC than there are senior managers, but that will most likely change very soon, the mix of that. And if you sum up the admins, senior associates, and managers, they make up 70% of the employees below partner at the Big Four accounting firms, which is basically just goes to show that the Big Four accounting firms are held up by very young people. I think most people know that, but it's just pretty astonishing to see the number. And that's how partners make all their money, by leveraging the lower cost people. Another interesting thing is they showed the number of promotions by level. They did this for diversity purposes because they say, here's how many people got promoted and here's their race. And if you look at that, well, I'm not necessarily cared about the race stuff, but it tells you the number by staffing level. And if you look at that, PwC promoted 3,202 from associate to senior associate. And then they promoted 2,595 from senior associate to manager. And basically what you're seeing there is almost 30% promoted from each class. And I'm sure senior associate, because they're promoting everybody basically after 2 to 3 years of being there. So as long as you stick around in the Big Four accounting firms, you do have a good chance of getting promoted. And this just goes to show that. But still, a lot of people can't stick around because it's tough work. And then same thing with senior associate. So senior associate, you have, it's just above 26%. It's almost 27%. So it's almost 30% of the people are getting promoted from senior associate to manager. Senior associate to manager is a little bit more difficult to get promoted to, but again, if you just stick around and do an okay job, you can get promoted. But I think there's, like I said before, there's a whole bunch of information in that report, in the PwC purpose report, that you can utilize. There's a whole lot that you probably can't utilize, but there's a whole lot of stuff that you can learn to get more insight into the Big Four accounting firms and the number of people that they have, the number of promotions that they have. I think this is going to be a more useful report for people going forward. The Big Four accounting firms are increasing their transparency, but they're not doing it from an altruistic purpose or to help employees. It's just really for the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if they were so invested in that, what took them so long to do this, but it used to be a lot more secrecy around this because they didn't want people to know all of this information. And they even have pay gap information. I'll probably speak about that on a different podcast. But that's the information I wanted to cover today. I wanted to thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast to stay up to date. And also check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.